My daughter got married in Paris and didn't invite me. I paid for her dream wedding, every euro of it. And then she emailed me, "You can watch via Google Earth, LOL." That was the moment I knew I had to take back control. My name's Judith, but most people just call me Judy. Before I tell you everything, I want to ask, where are you watching from? Are you somewhere warm right now? Or maybe you're sitting by a window like I am, wondering how love can twist itself into something so unrecognizable. Wherever you are, thank you for listening. Because this story, it's not an easy one to tell. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon while I was grading essays at my dining table. The subject line said, "Change of plans, wedding update." For a moment I smiled. Maybe she was finally sending my flight details. Maybe after weeks of silence, she'd realized that no matter how Parisian her new life became, I was still her mother. But when I opened it, I remember my hand froze on the mouse. "Hey Mom, don't worry about coming to Paris after all. The guest list got tight, and with everything going on, it'll just be easier if you watch from home. You can watch via Google Earth. LOL. Just like that. No call, no warmth, no mention of the thousands I had wired to her for the ceremony. I remember reading it over and over, trying to find the hidden kindness in the cruelty. Maybe she was joking. Maybe LOL was her awkward way of softening it. But as the minutes passed, I realized no, she meant every word. I stared at the email until my screen dimmed. The house felt suddenly too quiet, like even the walls were holding their breath. Amelia, my only daughter, my reason for everything. When her father, Thomas, passed away 15 years ago, she was only 12. I remember holding her through the night, promising she'd never have to face this world alone. I worked 2 jobs teaching literature by day and tutoring by night just to keep her in a good school, to give her choices I never had. When she got accepted into a university in Paris, I cried tears of pride. She was always the dreamer, the artist, the one who believed she was meant for something bigger. I sold my mother's sapphire ring, the last thing I had from her, to help cover Amelia's tuition. And I didn't mind, because what's a jewel compared to your child's future? But somewhere between semesters and seasons, my daughter changed. The calls became shorter, then they stopped coming. Her voice, once warm and hurried, grew careful, distant, like she was editing herself before speaking to me. Then one day, she introduced me to Julien, the French fiancé, the heir to a hotel chain. His smile was perfect, practiced, and though he called me Madame Judith with politeness, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of pity, maybe, or disdain. Still, I told myself, if she's happy, that's all that matters. That's what mothers do. We convince ourselves that heartbreak is love wearing new clothes. When the wedding plans began, Amelia said it would be small, intimate, she called it. She sent me spreadsheets and invoices, designer venue, custom gown, a private orchestra. I hesitated, but she sounded so hopeful, so sure. "Mom, I promise it'll all be worth it. You'll be so proud." So I transferred the money, bit by bit, draining the savings I'd built for retirement. I imagined walking her down the aisle myself, maybe giving a small speech, something simple about love and resilience. But instead, I got that email. That 4-sentence message that turned every sacrifice I'd made into a punchline. I didn't reply that night. I couldn't. Instead, I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea, the same way I used to when she was a baby and wouldn't sleep 2 spoons of honey, 1 cube of sugar. My hands shook so badly I spilled half of it on the counter. The steam fogged the kitchen window, and I caught my reflection in it, tired eyes, streaks of gray, a woman who'd given her all and somehow ended up empty. That's when I whispered it, softly, almost to myself. "Fine, I'll watch." Not in defeat, not even in sorrow. But because if my daughter wanted me to see her life from afar, then that's exactly what I would do. And maybe, just maybe, I'd learn something from the distance. The morning of the wedding, I woke before the sun. It wasn't excitement that stirred me, it was something heavier, quieter. A strange stillness that settles in the chest when you know you're about to witness something you shouldn't have to. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. 6:47 a.m. I didn't sleep. How could I? Her wedding day. And I was invited only as a spectator. Not even that, really. An invisible presence floating somewhere over a digital map. I set up my old laptop on the kitchen table, opened Google Earth and typed Notre Dame des Fleurs, Paris. It spun the earth rotating in that familiar blue glow, crossing oceans and continents, zooming into streets I'd never walk. It felt absurd, almost comical, the world shrinking to a screen, my motherhood to a pixel. I zoomed into the cathedral, squinting at the tiny blur of cars, the movement of people. Somewhere in that space, my daughter was putting on a white gown. Someone was arranging flowers I paid for, and a quartet was probably tuning violins to the sound of champagne corks. And I, her mother, sat in Ohio, with cold tea and trembling hands. I refreshed the browser again and again, though I knew I wouldn't really see anything. Still, it felt like if I stared hard enough, I could somehow feel her heartbeat across the ocean. That's what mothers do, we find ways to see through the distance. Every few minutes, I'd click away to her social media. Her friends had begun posting stories, pictures of the Paris skyline, snippets of music, the edge of her gown. My throat tightened as I saw her silhouette through someone's blurry photo. She looked beautiful. Of course she did. But she also looked far away. Not just physically, something in her face had changed. Her smile was perfect, practiced, just like Julian's. There was a stiffness in the way she tilted her head, a kind of performance. I could tell, even from a stranger's camera, that she was trying too hard to appear happy. As the ceremony went on, I found myself drifting back to a different day. Another dress, another white ribbon. Amelia, at 5 years old, standing on a chair in the living room, wearing an old bedsheet as a veil. She'd look up at me, grinning, saying, "Mommy, I'm marrying you." And I'd laugh, pull her into my arms and say, "You already did, sweetheart." The memory broke something in me, because that same child, the one who once clung to my leg, who couldn't sleep without hearing my voice, was now marrying a man who had successfully convinced her that her mother didn't belong in the picture. I got up, opened the curtains, and looked out at the street. It was snowing softly late for March, but gentle, the kind of snow that doesn't stick, just floats like ash. I thought about Paris, about her walking down some grand aisle, the light from stained glass painting her dress in color. I pictured her eyes darting toward the back, maybe wondering for half a second if she'd made the right choice, if she'd noticed the empty seat that should have been mine. But I knew better than to hope. At 9:12 a.m., a photo appeared on my screen posted by one of Julian's relatives, a high-resolution image of the newlyweds. There she was, Amelia, in a lace gown arm in arm with him, standing before a marble arch. But her smile wasn't joy, it was fear, disguised as elegance. A kind of brittle stillness, the kind you see on people trying to hold something broken together. My chest tightened. Something in that photo wasn't right. Even the caption, "A perfect union of two worlds," sounded rehearsed. I shut the laptop. The room felt smaller, almost suffocating. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap, letting the cold water run over my hands. It grounded me somehow. In that moment, I realized how utterly alone I was, not just in my kitchen, but in her life. I had become a ghost in my own story. The woman who'd worked, saved, and sacrificed had been erased with a single LOL. But here's the strange thing about pain: it doesn't just destroy, it clarifies. It shows you what's left when love strips away your illusions. And as I stood there, staring at the snow dissolving on the window, I made myself a quiet promise. If she ever needed me again, truly needed me, I'd be ready.
The kind that protect love
but I wouldn't be the same woman she left behind.
I told myself that was true.
That evening, I checked my phone one last time. No message, no thank you, no I miss you. Just a feed full of strangers celebrating a fairy tale I had unknowingly funded. Still, before going to bed, I whispered something into the dark. Congratulations, my darling. I hope the world is as kind to you as I was. And as I lay there, the glow of Paris lights flickering through my imagination, I didn't realize that in less than 24 hours, my phone would start ringing over and over again. Because something had gone terribly wrong. When something shatters, it doesn't always break in that moment. Sometimes the crack begins years earlier, invisible, small, waiting for the right pressure to finally split it open. Looking back now, I see the crack clearly. It started the year Amelia left for Paris. She was 22, bright-eyed, full of ideas and impatience. She wanted to study art history, where the light was born, as she put it. I still remember her words that morning at the airport. She kissed my cheek and said, "Mom, this is where I finally become me." And I smiled through the ache in my throat, because that's what mothers do. We let them go, even when every bone in us wants to hold on. No, I waved until she disappeared through security. When I got back to the car, her scarf was still in the back seat, lavender-colored, soft and frayed from years of use. I kept it folded in my drawer for months, just to feel close to her. At first, the distance didn't hurt so much. We talked every Sunday. She'd send pictures of narrow Paris streets, cafes with chairs stacked like toy houses, and sketchbooks full of faces she'd drawn. I lived for those calls. But slowly the rhythm changed. The calls shortened. The "I miss you" turned into "Sorry, Mom, it's late here." Then one week, no call at all. I told myself she was busy, that she was growing, that she didn't need her mother to hold her hand anymore. But inside, I felt it, that familiar hollow space that forms when love starts retreating. Then came Julien. I first heard his name in passing, this guy from the gallery. A few weeks later, his name came with adjectives, brilliant, charming, connected. And then one day, it came with a title, fiancé. "Already?" I asked over the phone, trying to sound more curious than concerned. She laughed. "When you know, Mom." Her tone was light, but something inside me twisted. I wanted to be happy for her truly, but every time I imagined the man who'd won her heart, I felt like he'd taken more than that he'd taken my place as her constant. The first time we met was over video call. Julien appeared beside her, his smile too perfect, too composed. "Madame Judith," he said, his French accent wrapping around my name like lace. "You raised an incredible woman." I thanked him, unsure if it was a compliment or performance. When I hung up that night, I stared at my reflection in the blank screen, noticing, maybe for the first time, the lines at the corners of my mouth, the tiredness in my eyes. I whispered to myself, "She's grown up, Judy, let her live." But then the emails began, invoices, deposits, bookings. She said, "Mom, it's just until Julian's account's clear. His family's finances are complicated right now." So I sent money. For the venue, then the catering, then the photographer. By the time I added it all, it was over $47,000. Almost everything I had saved for retirement. She promised to pay me back, but I didn't care. I told myself, it's her dream. Every mother wants her daughter's dream to come true. Then she invited me to Paris for the engagement dinner. It was the first time I'd seen her in over 2 years. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. She looked stunning, silk dress, hair swept up, elegance radiating from her. But her eyes, they didn't hold mine the way they used to. They darted around as if she was afraid I might embarrass her just by existing. The dinner was held at a long marble table filled with people whose laughter sounded rehearsed. I sat at the far end. Julien's mother, Madame Rousseau, was a tall woman with the kind of beauty that dared you to look away. At one point, she leaned toward her husband, not realizing I could hear her. In French, she whispered, "Elle est si provinciale, on dirait une institutrice de campagne." I understood enough to know what it meant. She's so provincial, like a country school teacher. I felt the words hit my chest like stones. Julien didn't correct her. Amelia didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose silence. After dinner, I tried to tell Amelia how I felt. She sighed, exasperated. "Mom, please, not tonight. You're reading too much into it." "But she's Julien's mother," she interrupted. "Can you please just try to fit in?" That night, in the small guest room they'd given me, I cried quietly into a pillow. Not because of what that woman said, but because my daughter had chosen not to defend me. That was 2 months before the email. 2 months before I learned what it meant to be erased politely. Now, sitting here in the quiet aftermath of her wedding, I could finally see the pattern how I'd built her world brick by brick, only to be walled out of it. Still, part of me refused to let go completely, because motherhood, no matter how bruised, doesn't just stop. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an international number. I ignored it at first, assuming it was another spam call, but it rang again, and again, and again. When I finally looked, my heart stopped. It was Amelia. The same daughter who hadn't called me in months now dialing over and over, like her life depended on it. Something had happened. The phone rang 7 times before I picked it up. By then, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely tap. Except, "Mom," her voice cracked mid-word, a sound I hadn't heard since she was a child. "Amelia? Mom, something's happened. Please don't hang up." There was noise behind her, sirens shouting, the kind of background chaos that makes your stomach turn cold. "Amelia, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She was sobbing, gulping air between sentences. "It's all ruined. Everything, Julien, the wedding, he's gone." "Gone?" "Mom, the police came. They said his accounts were fake. He stole money from investors, from his company, from..." Her voice broke again. "From me." The world around me blurred. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, as if that could somehow make her words make sense. "Amelia, slow down. Where are you right now?" I'm outside the hotel. Reporters are everywhere. His parents disappeared. Mom, they knew. They knew he wasn't who he said he was." I gripped the counter edge to steady myself. My mind flashed through every transfer, every bill I'd paid, every dream she'd built with my savings. All gone. In that moment, a strange calm came over me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was habit. Mothers know how to hold the world steady when it collapses. "Listen to me," I said softly. "Are you safe?" She sniffed. I don't know where to go. They took my passport. The hotel said I still owe them for the reception." "Okay," I said, my voice firmer. "You'll go to the U.S. Embassy. They'll help you get a temporary passport." "Mom, I don't have money for a cab. Can you send something?" The irony hit me like a cruel joke. After everything, she was calling for help. After telling me to watch via Google Earth, she now needed me to bring her home. For a long moment, I didn't answer. The silence stretched so far that even the static between us seemed to breathe. "Mom?" she whispered. I closed my eyes. The image of her wedding dress, the one I'd paid for, flashed before me. Her lace-covered arms, her brittle smile. Finally, I spoke. "You told me to watch from afar, remember?" My tone was calm, almost detached. "So that's what I'm doing. She gasped. Mom, please, don't say that. Amelia, I said quietly, do you know how many nights I sat up worrying about you? How many times I checked my phone hoping for a message? I was stupid, I know, she cried. But please, I have no one else. Her voice cracked on that last word, no one. For a second, I wanted to cave. Every instinct screamed at me to fix it, to wire money, to save her again, but something inside me refused. Because this time, I understood what she had never learned. Sometimes love has to step back to be seen. Go to the embassy, I said finally. They'll take care of you. When you're safe, call me again. She started to protest, but I ended the call. And then I just stood there. The house felt weightless, almost echoing with the sound of her sobs lingering in my ear. Outside, the snow had melted overnight. The street shimmered with puddles reflecting pale sunlight, small mirrors fractured and wet. I walked to the window and whispered, "She's alive. That's enough for now." But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing alone in some cold Paris street, mascara running, her perfect world turned to rubble. The next morning, I opened my email. There were 20 new messages, headlines from gossip sites. Heiress wedding scandal rocks Paris elite. Julianne Rousseau vanishes after fraud exposure. One photo showed Amelia being escorted into a police car, not handcuffed, just stunned. The caption read, "Bride left bankrupt after groom's disappearance." My throat closed. She looked so small. I shut the laptop, buried my face in my hands, and wept. Not just for her, but for everything I'd lost, believing she was safe. Still, beneath the ache, something else stirred. A flicker of grim satisfaction, or maybe justice. Life had shown her what my words never could. 2 days later, the phone rang again. This time her voice was quiet, steady. "Mom, I'm at the airport. They helped me. I'm coming home." There was no pride left in her tone, no distance, just a hollow tiredness I recognized all too well. I didn't know what would happen when she arrived, or whether forgiveness could ever rebuild what she'd broken. But as I hung up, I whispered to myself, "All right, Amelia, let's see what home feels like now." The day she came home was gray, windless, the kind of day that hangs heavy between seasons. I'd known it was coming. Her final message had been clear. Flight 482. Landing 3:40 p.m. Still, when I heard the knock, my chest seized. 3 sharp raps, familiar, hesitant, like the rhythm of someone asking for permission to exist again. I opened the door. There she was. Amelia stood on the porch in jeans that no longer fit her properly, a wrinkled coat too light for the weather, and a pair of cracked heels that had seen too many cobblestones. Her eyes, once painted with confidence, were bare now, rimmed red, her face pale from exhaustion. She clutched one small suitcase. That was all. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, not empty, but crowded with years of unspoken things. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. I didn't move. I just looked at her, the woman who used to be my little girl, now stripped of all her glitter and certainty. Finally, I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in slowly, her steps cautious as if she were entering a memory instead of a house. The scent of the place, cinnamon and old wood, must have hit her. I saw her eyes flick toward the family photos on the mantel. There was one of us from her graduation, my arm around her shoulder, both of us smiling so widely it almost looked rehearsed. She looked away. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. "I figured," I replied. My tone wasn't cruel, just plain. She nodded, setting the suitcase near the couch. "I'm sorry," she said, so softly I almost didn't hear it. "For what exactly?" I asked. Her lip trembled. "For everything, for saying those things. For that email. I was angry and stupid, and I thought—" She stopped, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I don't even know what I thought anymore." I crossed my arms, steadying my breath. "Angry and stupid," I repeated. "That's one way to describe it." She looked at me, tears threatening to spill. "Mom, please, don't make me beg. I don't need money. I just need somewhere to feel safe." Something inside me softened, not completely, but enough to remember. The memory of holding her as a baby, her tiny hand gripping my finger like a promise. And here she was, again, not my child, not quite a stranger, but something in between. I nodded toward the guest room. "You can stay for a while. But understand this, Amelia, things can't go back to the way they were." She swallowed hard and nodded. "I know. She disappeared down the hall, closing the door quietly behind her. When I heard the click of the latch, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for 2 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her faint movements, drawers opening, a suitcase zipper, the soft rhythm of crying muffled into a pillow. I made tea and sat by the kitchen window again, the same spot I'd watched her wedding from. It felt poetic, almost cruel, how life had brought her back to the same house she'd once looked down upon. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. She stood in the doorway, hair loose, eyes puffy. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the kettle still hissing faintly on the stove. Finally, she whispered, "He said he loved me, Mom. He said he wanted to build a life with me." Her voice cracked. And I believed him, every word. I looked at her, this broken reflection of the girl I'd raised. "And I thought," I said quietly, "you loved me for who I am." She winced, like the words themselves hurt. "I did," she said. "I still do." "Then why did you treat me like I was something you needed to hide?" Her tears fell freely now. "Because I wanted to fit into his world, and to do that, I had to erase mine." That confession lingered between us, raw and trembling. I took a slow sip of tea, the steam curling up like breath between us. "You can't erase where you come from, Amelia," I said. "You can only forget who you are trying to please." She covered her face with her hands. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "Then," I said softly, "it's time to find out." We sat there until dawn, 2 women with the same eyes, both haunted by what love had cost them. No apologies could fix the past, but in that fragile stillness, something began to breathe again. Not forgiveness yet, but the quiet pulse of understanding. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter not the socialite, not the bride, but the girl who once promised to marry her mother with a bedsheet veil. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. Morning light spilled through the curtains, painting soft gold across the kitchen floor. Amelia was already awake, sitting at the table with a mug between her hands. Her hair was tied back, face pale but calmer than the night before. There was something different about her, quieter, humbled, as if the arrogance that had once driven her had melted away in Paris rain. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from her. She looked up, her voice faint. "I didn't sleep much." "I know," I said. "Neither did I." The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore. It felt fragile, tentative, like both of us were afraid that one wrong word would send everything shattering again. Finally, she said, "There's something I need to tell you, something you deserve to know." I waited. She took a deep breath, eyes glassy. "It wasn't Julian who paid for the wedding, Mom. It was you. I mean, technically, your money, but he made me believe it was his." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Amelia's fingers trembled around her cup. "Remember the transfer? When you wired me the money for the venue deposit? You thought it was going to the planner, but Julian, he convinced me to send it through him instead. Said it would simplify the French paperwork." I froze. She swallowed hard. "He told me he'd handle everything. I believed him. But then I found out he took your money, Mom. All of it. He used part of it for the wedding, but the rest he invested it, or said he did. The truth is, he was in debt." My chest tightened. "So that's why." "Yes," she whispered. "That's why he didn't want you there. He was afraid you'd ask questions. He told me you'd embarrass us, that you'd make everything about yourself. I was stupid enough to believe him." Her voice broke, and she pressed her palm to her eyes. "When he said not to invite you, I agreed. I thought maybe you'd understand one day. But I see now how cruel that was." The room spun a little. My own daughter had been tricked not just into betrayal, but into carrying someone else's lies. I should have been furious. Maybe part of me was. But another part, the mother in me, saw the scared child beneath the guilt. I took a breath. "And what happened after the wedding?" Her mouth quivered. "He changed. Completely. Cold, controlling. I thought it was stress. But one night, I found messages with another woman. When I confronted him, he laughed, said he'd already gotten what he needed from me." She looked at me then, eyes wet and full of disbelief. "He meant the money, Mom. Your money." I felt my stomach twist. Amelia continued, voice shaking. "I tried to fix it. I tried to reason with him, but then the account started draining. He moved everything. I didn't even know until my own card got declined. That's when I called you." Her confession hung heavy in the air, like a storm that had finally broken. I leaned back, the pieces falling into place. The email, the mockery, the sudden silence. It had all been Julian's manipulation, not just vanity or cruelty. And my daughter, my own flesh and blood, had been a pawn in his performance. But she had also chosen not to see it until now. I looked at her eyes red, shoulders trembling, and I saw the price she'd paid for loving the wrong person. "You were blinded by love," I said quietly. "It happens to the best of us." She nodded, tears spilling over. I thought I was protecting him, but all I did was destroy everything real in my life. Her voice cracked. "Especially you." I reached across the table, hesitated, then placed my hand over hers. Her skin was cold, fragile, a reminder that even the ones who hurt us can still bleed. "You can't undo the past," I said softly, "but you can rebuild what's left if you're willing to start with honesty." She nodded, unable to speak. We sat like that for a long time. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. The clock ticked. The house, for once, didn't feel haunted. It just felt quiet, waiting. Finally, Amelia whispered, "I contacted the lawyer this morning. Julian's been arrested in Paris. Fraud and embezzlement. He tried to sell the property he bought under your name." I blinked, stunned. "Under my name?" She nodded. "I think he thought you'd never find out." A bitter laugh escaped me, not out of humor, but disbelief. Life has a way of circling back, doesn't it? She smiled weakly. "Yeah, guess it does." That morning, as she left to meet the police liaison in town, I watched her from the window. For the first time in years, she didn't look like she was walking away from me. She looked like she was walking towards something, even if she didn't yet know what it was. When she turned back to wave, I felt it, that quiet shift that comes after a storm. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the space where forgiveness could grow. A month passed. The first week was filled with police reports, emails from embassies, and calls at odd hours of the night. The second, with paperwork and restitution forms I barely understood. By the third, the house began to breathe again. The air no longer felt stale with regret. And by the fourth, Amelia started smiling again. Not the polished, perfect smile I'd seen in photographs from Paris, but something smaller, honest and fragile, the kind that comes from surviving something that should have broken you. She'd begun taking long walks in the mornings. Sometimes she came back with wildflowers, sometimes with stories about the neighbors' kids or the smell of bread from the bakery downtown. It wasn't much, but it was living. And me? I'd found peace in my routines again. The kettle whistled, the floor creaked, the wind brushed through the curtains. Life as simple as it once was. But something had shifted between us. A rhythm, a quiet understanding that didn't need words. One evening, she came to me with a small envelope. "I've been saving," she said, "from the little job I picked up at the bakery. I want you to have this." I opened it. Inside was a folded check. Not much, but significant. I looked at her. "What's this for?" Her voice trembled. "It's the first payment. I know I can't repay what I lost, but I want to try." I smiled faintly, shaking my head. "Money isn't what I needed back, Amelia." She frowned. "Then what do you need?" I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, just like I used to when she was little. "I needed my daughter," I said softly, "and I think I finally have her again." Her eyes filled instantly. She leaned forward, hugging me tightly, her body shaking against mine. For a moment, all the distance, all the bitterness, all the words we'd both thrown like daggers, they dissolved. It didn't erase the past, but it finally gave it meaning. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at my writing desk, the same one where I used to write letters to her when she moved away. I pulled out an old notebook and began to write again, not to her this time, but to myself. "Forgiveness," I wrote, isn't about pretending the wound never happened. It's about choosing to stop touching it every day just to see if it still hurts. I paused, tracing the line slowly. She broke my heart because she trusted the wrong person, but I broke my own heart every time I refused to let it heal. It was strange realizing that peace isn't an event. It's a decision you have to make again and again, sometimes every morning when you wake up. A week later, we stood together in the garden. The roses I'd once let wither had begun to bloom again, vibrant and stubborn. Amelia knelt beside me, pruning the branches carefully. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked quietly. "Julian?" She nodded. "Not really," I said. "He's just a chapter now, one that taught me something." She glanced up. "What's that?" I smiled faintly. "That you can lose almost everything you thought mattered and still find something worth keeping." She exhaled, a shaky little laugh escaping her. "You always make things sound so simple," Lau chuckled. "That's because I've lived long enough to know the truth isn't complicated. People are." We laughed together, then not the laughter of avoidance, but the laughter that comes from shared pain finally softening. Later that evening, she showed me her new passport application. "I'm going to Paris again," she said almost shyly. "But not to live, just to close everything out legally." I nodded, proud and a little afraid. "You'll be okay this time." She smiled. "I have a better compass now." When she said goodbye at the airport 2 weeks later, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't emotional, but because I finally trusted that she'd return, not as the woman who left, but as the daughter who found her way back. Now, when I look back on that awful email you can watch via Google Earth LOL, I don't feel the same sting I once did. I feel distance. I feel gratitude. That humiliation, that heartbreak, that night when my daughter mocked the woman who raised her, it became the mirror I needed to see who I truly was. Strong, patient, capable of surviving even when love feels like betrayal. Because that's what motherhood is, not just loving through joy, but through the ashes of disappointment, until love becomes endurance, and endurance becomes grace. It's funny how life works. I once paid for a wedding I wasn't invited to. But in the end, I was invited to something far rarer, my daughter's redemption. And that, I realized, was worth more than any Paris ceremony could ever offer. As I sit here now, looking out the same window where I once watched her leave, I whisper to the night air, "We made it." Because forgiveness isn't a grand act. It's a quiet whisper that says, "I'm still here,